Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 217 of the Sticks and the Six podcast. As always, I'm your host, Andrew Forbes, here with my co-host, Peter Barricchini, and brought to you by the fine folks over at the Hockey Podcast Network. Before we get into all the fun stuff, we got a solid show coming up today. We got a guest coming on, the prospect Don, to talk a little bit of prospects and World Junior Championship. A lot going on as we head into the midpoint of December. But before we get into all of that fun stuff, Peter, how you doing this week, my friend?
Doing great, man. Yeah, like you said, it's we're getting into that time of the season right now. Holidays are rapidly approaching right now. Obviously, you know my yearly tradition, going to Montreal. I'm already getting packed. I'm all set to go. I'm not necessarily in vacation / holiday mode, but it's getting there right now. A couple more weeks left to, get ready for work, or in terms of, writing. I got a couple pieces lined up before I head on out, and I'm basically off for like 4 to 5 days, but I'm going to be working on my 2026 January rankings, and I'm dreading right now because I am going back and forth, and I know we're going to have like a lot of prospect talk right now, and I am pretty sure when Anthony comes on, we will talk about, some Canadian D-men who are on Team Canada, who are pushing for that number one spot right now. And it is going to be a tough battle. Seeing some of the rankings right now and Gavin McKenna slowly dropping, man, it is tough, but I know we're going to save that for a different time, but we're here to talk about the Leafs. And I'm honestly, if you were to ask me a couple weeks ago or like just last week, how I felt about this team, it was not looking good. You were probably the more optimistic one out of both of us, and I'm pretty optimistic too, but like I saw a lot of red flags with this team, but right now it looks like they're starting to turn a new leaf, no pun intended. And now they're just literally 4 points out of top spot right now. So I'm trying to figure out, or I'm pretty sure everyone's trying to figure out, what is going on with this team right now, because they're not officially out of it. And we know that US Thanksgiving, that's the benchmark of, teams locked into a playoff spot, who's going to make it, who's going to leave or get kicked out. Toronto's still in the thick of things, and I did not have that kind of high hope or expectation.
Yeah, no, and it's funny you mentioned like I was the one coming in with a little bit of a positive take to it, because
You were.
Normally we have a little bit of an opposite feel there. Normally you're the guy coming in with a little bit more positivity. I'm the one who kind of shakes that off, and
I'm the one being the Grinch right now, basically.
That's right. Yeah, I'm Cindy Lou Who over here, but anyways, yeah, it's crazy because like we've talked like for the last 3 or 4 pods that the worry should not set in just yet. And the reason being is that the Leafs haven't had a healthy lineup all season long. And again, we're back to that same conversation. Joe Wall's now out, right? With whatever it is, they're saying it's a week time. Stolarz still hasn't skated. The latest news on Chris Tanev doesn't look good for the remainder of the season. There's some talk that he there's his injuries kind of aligning with the same progression that Jake Muzzin had, which, isn't good news, obviously, but
considering how Jake Muzzin wasn't able to come back from it.
Exactly. And now you get like a fill-in like Dakota Mermis, who's now out for at least a month, which we'll get into that conversation shortly here. But, yeah, I mean, the Leafs have not had a healthy lineup, and all of a sudden, say what you will about how he's looked this season, Matthews comes out and said, look, I'm ready to throw this team on my back. I'm ready to carry him through, where, don't count us out. And, you go from that to now Nylander's pointless in the last, I believe it's 3 or 4 games, 4 games. So he's been pulled aside by Craig Berube. There's constant conversations here, and there's been no panic on the side of the Leafs. They haven't gone out and made a stupid traded away another first-round pick for a piece that wouldn't put them over the edge.
I don't think they could at that point, even if they wanted to.
Right, but I mean, they haven't panicked, right? There's no panic. They haven't fired Craig Berube. They're still riding the tide with their coach. Brad Treliving's still looking at his options, and all of a sudden, we talked about it last week. 2 out of the next 3 games for them were must-win games. They got 3 out of a possible 4 points from those 2 games.
Yeah.
Divisional games.
And
And they shut out the Tampa Bay. Sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say the Florida Panthers were one of those games too.
I wasn't even including that. I was talking Carolina, Montreal, and Tampa Bay.
The recent one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And they shut out the division leaders in Tampa Bay 2-0 on the back of Dennis Hildeby's first career shutout. Like this team is not making sense right now, but not making sense in a good way if you're part of Leafs Nation.
It is legit expect the unexpected with this team. And like you said, they managed to knock off the Stanley Cup champs. But again, Florida's dealing with their own injuries and situation, and they were reeling themselves. They took advantage of that. Carolina, I thought that Carolina had, with the extra rest, they were ready to go. But Toronto managed to pick things up, and they absolutely played relatively well against a top Metro Division leader. Montreal, again, bit of a different story right now. They got absolutely hemmed and hammered in that game, and I'm kind of surprised that they went to shootout. I hate the shootouts, but I'm kind of surprised that they were able to just salvage a point. And then the Tampa Bay Lightning game. Yeah, that was definitely one that, they're still dealing with their own injuries too. Vasilevsky wasn't in net, but, Johansson really stood tall for Tampa Bay. He made a number of key saves, and probably the score should have been a little bit higher than it was. But I do agree with you in the sense that the last 2-3 weeks leading up to this stretch, where they're now 3-1 or 3-0-1 in December, I agree. I at one point I said you have to make a big time move to try and salvage something. It turns out that the smallest move that they made was just picking up Troy Stecher off waivers, and that was a breath of fresh air to this defense. Nothing major to move the needle in terms of like notoriety, but it was something that made them much more consistent and better on the back end. I do agree. Firing Craig Berube probably would have been the worst decision considering how well he coached this team last year, and it's relatively the same roster, minus one Mitch Marner. Again, tough hole to fill, but it's up to everybody else to step up. And I love the fact that the third line is playing well. Dakota Joshua is coming into his own. Nick Waugh is looking a little bit more comfortable. Easton Cowan, I mean, we can't say enough great things about him, and he's already in the top 6 right now. So the pieces, I agree that there is like a move to be made, but it's something that needs to be thought out before the deadline. And I think maybe come mid and January, the Maple Leafs should have a clear picture of what they need to do. Obviously, you need to get another defender right now because that is important. I think that Stecher has held his own and has looked good with Jake McCabe most of the time. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I think this is the guy you can't trade or move for another asset. You got to keep him and maybe extend him because he has played well. This is probably, even towards the tail end of last season and even right now, this is the best OEL has looked aside from winning the Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. I think that as well, you got to still look at a top 6 forward, but I think right now your pressing factor is now a defender, but one with a little bit more mobility and not another like Chris Tanev like defender. Someone with a little bit more offensive upside, but can still eat pucks, can still defend against the rush, and then be a little bit more consistent with that because the Maple Leafs have just been brutal in that area all season.
Yeah, like let's not mince words here. The Leafs have done it right now. They're on this run 6-2-2 in their last 10 since without Tanev, without Carlo, without Stolarz, partially without Joe Woll. It's pretty incredible the kind of run that they're on right now. And sorry, I'm just getting a coffee here. Mid-show coffee.
There we go. Mid-show Joe.
See that? Yeah. Anyways, worth noting too, like Bobby McMahon is slashing his way through the opposition as well. No pun intended. But we'll get to that as well in just a moment. But I want to jump on Hildeby here because there was so many questions, so much worry around the Leafs goaltending. Obviously with Stolarz out of the lineup, and then the question marks around Joseph Woll. What was his absence about earlier in the year? Nobody knows, and respectfully, nobody's asking the question, which is great. But then he goes down again, and all of a sudden now it's an injury, and people are questioning how long he's going to be out because nobody really knows what's going on with Joe Wall. So you get Dennis Hildeby to come in, 24-year-old. This is from James Myrtle. Dennis Hildeby, 936 save percentage and leads all goalies in the NHL in goals saved above expected per 60 minutes this season. On top of that, in his last 3 games, he's stopped 71 of 72 shots, 986 save percentage with the one shutout. So this is a 24-year-old that, there were high hopes. And even last season, we can go back and we'll pull the clip. I'm a big advocate for Dennis Hildeby. Mm-hmm. I'm a big advocate for Artur Akhtiamov. I think the Leafs goaltending prospects are very intriguing pieces in their farm system. I don't think anybody looked at Dennis Hildeby at 24 years old at the beginning of this season and said this guy is going to be the guy they ride on a 6-2-2 streak. I don't think that was even in the conversation. It wasn't. I certainly didn't have it on my bingo card. So to see Dennis Hildeby come in, and going back to Troy Stecher as well, last game during the shutout, you got to be good to get lucky sometimes. Troy Stecher made 2 incredible goal line stops. Yeah. So it doesn't need to be the big name that comes in here and changes the dynamic of this team. You don't need to trade first-round picks, second-round picks for the Ryan O'Reillys or the Brandon Carlos. You need a guy like a Troy Stecher who is a misfit on a team that should also be doing much better and isn't, to leave that atmosphere that he was in, leave the chaos as he put it, and come into a new scene, get a new feel for a new system, and find his legs and find his game and play to the ability that he can without maybe overstepping what his role is. And that's what Troy Stecher's done. And Dennis Hildeby has come in with so much confidence. He's talking about how he wants to steal this net and make it his. I love it. I want to see that all day long. I think Dennis Hildeby's the guy right now. You got to ride him as long as he can because he's hot, he's confident, and what's better than a confident 24-year-old goalie?
Nothing at this point. And I wholeheartedly agree that, this is a little bit more of a tricky situation. And just as when things are starting to look well for Wall, you have to rely on Dennis Hildeby right now. And that's your third string goaltender. But I agree because coming into training camp, I think there was a lot riding on him to have a great, impression. And last year at times, barely, he played in 6 games, 3-3, 878, 316 goals against average. He was good at times. He was shaky at times. There was still a little bit more seasoning to be done with him. And even this year where I don't know why they held on to Caden Primo, because I thought Dennis Hildeby was the better of the 2 goaltenders in preseason. Probably should have started off with them, but he didn't take that as a slight. He went down. Again, the numbers didn't look great. 2-2-1, 890, 274 with the Marlies this year. And now all of a sudden he's come back up. He's come back with a vengeance. He's carrying this team on his back. And, this is a guy that's just taking it game by game right now. And that's what you want to see, especially in a young goaltender. Let him ride this hot wave and start right now, because it may come back to earth for him where he may have a bad game or two. And it's on him to try and turn it back around with that mental toughness, with his ability to put it behind him and then come back with another strong effort and result. I think that there were a couple times last year where you really needed him to make a big time save and he didn't. Right when the team desperately needs him to make a big save, he's giving it to them right now. And I think that's a little bit of a glimmer of hope for this team where, yeah, you mentioned off the numbers right now. And again, it is a small sample for him right now, but who's to say that, there won't be a time where, you could rely on him a little bit more because you don't know when Stolarz is coming back. And I think to me that because he still hasn't skated and we still don't know exactly what's going on, that to me is a little bit of cause for concern in terms of his overall health. Joseph Woll, they said it's not going to be too long, so thank God it's not anything major with him. But
he was back on the ice today too.
Oh, Stolarz? That was a good sign. Yeah, good sign for him at least. So maybe he may have just tweaked something a little bit and they just gave him a little bit of extra rest as precaution. But yeah, if you got to rely on your two young goaltenders right now, guys that are possible faces of the franchise, and who knows, you'll probably have to rely on Akhtyamov in a back-to-back situation at some point. See what these guys have, because you drafted them, you developed them. They had good results in their respective leagues in Sweden and Russia. They had their moments in the AHL as well with Akhtyamov last year. Hildeby right now getting a little bit more experience in the NHL. This is what you want to see. And if you need your goalie to step up and carry the team and push them forward, then you know for sure that these are the guys that are going to do so. But then it comes up to a question where if you need to make a big time move and you need to move a goaltender, if a team wants a goaltender, it's got to come down to one of two or three options at this point, and Hildeby could be included in that. Where do you want to keep him, or you want to move off from someone like a Stolarz or a Wall? Do you feel confident in Hildeby despite the small sample size?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like your questions around injuries, I think you hold on to Hildeby.
Right? Have to,
like,
yeah.
I mean, the kid's already played more minutes this season than he played all of last season.
Yeah,
he's at a career high in time on ice. He's at a career high in games played already this year, and he's sitting at a 215 goals against, 936 save percentage after a 333 and 878 last season in the small sample size he had last season. So he's tall, he's big, he fills the net. He hasn't been injury prone thus far, knock on wood, but given the history of your other two goalies, you start to wonder that maybe this guy is the guy of the future. And that the bonus of all these injuries, like, granted, there's panic in Leafs Nation that they're not going to make the playoffs, but the bonus to all this is you're getting an opportunity to see the depth that you have within your organization. Like Henry Thrun was up today, on the ice practicing, getting ready for games. And I mean, that's something that you traded Ryan Reeves for. Ryan Reeves is having a hell of a season in San Jose, right? I think he's had four or five fights already, 2 goals. Like this guy's pushing 40, and he's playing still, like he should be on a line with Macklin Celebrini,
potting goals and throwing haymakers.
Yeah, so why not see what you got in that trade in Henry Thrun and bring him up and give him an opportunity? Remember, Marshall Riffai is going to be coming back too. There's another opportunity to see some more depth. He's skating now. I believe he's still got the no contact red on. But, I mean, the bonus to all these injuries is that you're getting to see what you have organizationally, and that's something that the Leafs need to know because they don't have a whole lot of depth when it comes to organizational depth. So
one other quick note on Hildeby, third in 5v5 save percentage, 943. And even looking in that category right now, Matt Murray's leading the way. Jesper Wallstedt is 2, Jonathan Quick 4, Logan Thompson 5, Mackenzie Blackwood 6, Pyotr Kochetkov 7, Brandon Bussi 8, Shesterkin, Kemper 9, 10. I mean, those are like the goaltenders that are like kind of backups. You need to rely on them for long stretches when their starter goes down. And those are guys that are carrying the workload for a bunch of other teams that are still getting somewhat good results right now. So it's just fun to point out right now that category is like more of like 2, 3, 4. I mean, Blackwood is a starter. Kochetkov is a starter for Carolina, but who would have thought that Matt Murray would be the starter for Seattle? Who would have thought that Jesper Wallstedt would be in contention of taking over the starter role right now or being a 1A, 1B this early? Jonathan Quick is still the backup. So it's like, you know what? This is fun to see. And Hildeby's part of that, small, like no-name group basically, or the lesser-known players in terms of like goaltenders having a big impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And, hopefully you can still ride that confidence over the next little while. Make sure your goaltenders get 100% healthy, and knowing that you have that will be a huge addition to the Leafs long term. We got to talk about this Bobby McMann thing because it's kind of blown up on social. Obviously, the conversation's the same one we've had for God knows how long. We talk about the Department of Player Safety, and we talk about the inconsistencies. It wasn't until today when Craig Berube finally spoke out and somebody grew a pair within the organization to say, hey, there's something fishy going on here. And I'm not saying it's an anti-Leaf Department of Player Safety. I'm saying there's a lack of consistency when it comes to overall punishment league wide, and it starts with, how many times over the last 2 days have you seen the Jacob Trouba slash to the Trent Frederick? I believe he got a $5,000 fine.
Yeah,
and then we go, and don't get me wrong, Bobby McMahon deserved to get a game.
Absolutely.
You're careless with your stick. You absolutely deserve to get a game.
Yeah.
You hit somebody in the head. We're talking about player safety. Dakota Mermis is going to miss a month's worth of hockey.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who, let's be honest, isn't in the show on a regular basis anyways.
Now and he's had a lot of history to himself.
Exactly. And if you watch the replay of that, the Gage Gonçalves knee on knee in the corner, there was zero attempt to avoid a knee on knee collision.
No. He knew what he was doing.
Mermis didn't even move.
Yeah.
He didn't even move. It's not like one of those neutral zone avoidances. But I mean, touch on that real quick. And then obviously, as we mentioned off the top of the show, we've got our guest, the prospect Don here as well. So we're going to get him on very shortly here, but touch base with how you felt about that.
I am going to try and be as quick as possible because I could go on and on about this the whole double standard of all this is McMahon gets a suspension. Again, he deserves it. Careless with the stick. But Bjorkstrand didn't even flinch at anything. It came down, it hit him, and he's still standing tall. McMahon gets a suspension for that. He deserves it. But lost in the fog of all of this, Mermis is the one that's injured. Gonçalves got a 5 and a misconduct, or a major for kneeing and misconduct. Usually when it's a major, that's grounds for review for an automatic suspension. So I don't understand why one is and the other isn't when one resulted in the injury and the other didn't. And what's really telling too, and I mentioned this too, and I added DOPS on this. I don't care. When your first tweet of the day is Bobby McMahon will have a hearing for his high stick on Bjorkstrand before a knee where a player got injured and that guy gets away scot-free, 4 hours later, they still haven't even said a word about the Gonçalves one. That to me is really disappointing. It's frustrating, and it's very telling that, yes, they had the player safety in regards to Bjorkstrand, but they did not have it for Mermis. That to me is the most disappointing factor of it all. And again, Mermis is going to miss some time. Bjorkstrand isn't, and McMahon gets a suspension when Bjorkstrand just walked away easily without any issue. So I don't get it. Berube has every right to say that, you know what, I'm unhappy with this. I don't think it's worth a suspension. Debatable. I mean, it may have come down on his shoulder. It did hit him in the head, kind of like the whole Morgan Riley, Ridley Gregg thing, what really happened. But you know what? Still careless. I'm just going to stop there before I regret saying something about, Peros, Department of Player Safety, the whole entire group and everything like that. Because, again, it seems like it's always the Maple Leafs that when something happens, they're just waiting to pick them off and suspend them for the most egregious reason that just makes you scratch your head. Well, you're doing this, but a lot of all of this other stuff is getting away scot-free. So who are you really trying to protect here?
Well, Peter, I rarely regret anything on this podcast, but I do know if I get going on this, we'll be here all night discussing this. So without further ado, let's bring on the prospect, Don, here. We're going to see if we get, there we go. A little bit different view, but how's it going, Anthony? How you doing, buddy? Welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on, my friend.
Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, boys. How you guys doing?
Doing fantastic.
Great.
We're going to see if we can get a little bit better of a layout here, but Peter, you get going here. I'm going to play with the layout while we're live.
Absolutely. So, Anthony, we've been talking, leading up to this, even like before the offseason. You've come on Prospect Corner, done a lot of draft stuff, helped us with our mock drafts as well. We're just going to get right into it. It's the most wonderful time of the year. World Juniors are coming up. A lot of the rosters are being finalized right now. Obviously, there's a lot of emphasis with, can USA repeat? Are Czechia going to be a force? Are Sweden's top prospects going to actually push them forward and give them a gold medal for the first time in, I believe, I don't know, maybe I can't remember 2012, 2013 since that last happened. Will Canada get back to being, top contender status? I just want to get your early thoughts on heading into the tournament right now.
Yeah, this is like the best time of year for prospect people, and the time of just like seeing who the people are that are going to be at the training camps, talking to a lot of these prospects. Like I just got off with Jackson Smith, and, we kind of just like gushed over the Canadian roster because, you got a guy like Gavin McKenna who can just have his Bedard moment, which I think he kind of needs right now with Tynan Lawrence being the number one player on a guy like Corey Pronman's top rankings. So then he got pushed down to 4. So I think there's a chip on Gavin McKenna's shoulder because he's looking at that stuff. He knows what's going to happen. So you have a team that, like with Canada, that's absolutely loaded. You got Misa, like Cameron Reed, like Carson Carrolls, Jackson Smith, who was drafted, Porter Martone. I mean, that roster is absolutely loaded. Caleb Desnoyers. Like, I would be surprised if USA had enough to stop them in sort of way. I think Sweden is probably the team to look out for. I was talking to Milton Gashrin last year before a international tournament, and they were just so upset because he had like 6 bronze medals and all they wanted was just something else. They ended up getting silver, but this Sweden team, they are building for that gold. They want it more than anything. I think the USA on paper hasn't had the strength, but in these international tournaments, they've just been incredible lately. I'm not really sure what it is. Even like some of the USHL competition that the NTDP is playing against, like they're getting destroyed in the East. I believe that they're like 8 or 10 points from the bottom in the East of the USHL, and everybody's talking about how bad the USHL is, which is just complete farce. But you're kind of just seeing like how the NTDP is performing against that, but then internationally they're just kind of destroying the competition. So it's really interesting because on paper, Canada and Sweden are the 2 best teams, but with the way the USA team has played internationally, it's kind of must watch. A guy I haven't even talked about, like Keaton Verhoff, Zane Parekh, like these guys are next generation incredible defensemen that the USA has to figure out how to score against. And then guys like Jack Ivankovic, who's one of my favorite goalies, Joshua Ravensbergen, Carter George, like that goalie 3, that tandem is so good that I'm not even sure how like another team is going to be able to compete with them. So it's going to be really interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned Sweden. One of the guys that obviously we're concerned about with the Leafs is Victor Johansson. What do you see from Victor Johansson, and like what kind of opportunities is this for a guy like him who was a lower end prospect who's worked his way up the ladder?
Well, it's funny because he comes from an NHL family. Both of his brothers were drafted in the 4th and 5th round. Every single person like in that family was drafted between like 105 and 148. So it's really funny. He's been preparing for this moment for a very long time. I do believe that on the brightest self, and he has performed really, really well this year. So I feel like, he can become a steal. He was a 2024 draft pick. This is kind of when you kind of want to see those guys take the leap, respectively in international tournaments. So I feel like it's a big opportunity. I know the Leafs definitely need to get more of these hits in the later rounds because they don't really pick a lot of, 1st, 2nd round picks because they're competitive. So, the Leafs do need to kind of have those hits. So I'm really excited for him. He's a mobile defenseman, really like defensive, but he's 2-way. So he does have some of that offensive pop, but I think it's more playmaking than goal scoring. His puck handling is a weapon that he can use. So I do like his game a little bit there. The size is coming. He was, I think, 148, then he jumped up to like 165 or so. So, he is putting in that muscle, and I feel like that's going to help his game a little bit. And this is an international tournament where you're going to see a lot of guys not really have that physical development, especially, the younger guys. So that's actually good. It's not going to he's going to fare well, and he's playing against older players in his league respectively. So I feel like it's a good opportunity for him.
It's funny that you brought up his stature when he got drafted, because I remember being in the media room and I see the Maple Leafs come up in the Sphere, and I see Victor Johansson's name come up. So obviously wasn't on my radar, wasn't on a lot of other, Maple Leafs media or just overall media's roster or radar as well. So I do a quick search and I see, he's got the 6 feet, but he was also 140 pounds. That was a little bit of a concern. But the main thing for him was adding that strength, adding a little bit muscle, even coming into like their prospect development camp, pizza, getting a little bit bigger, he knew that was one of the main things that he needed to do, put it up 39 points last year. And I think the big reason that I think that really put him on the map was that World Junior Summer Showcase where, Leo Salim Wallenius looked really good. Satchel Boumediene looked really good, but he was in there in terms of top defensive producers for Sweden on that back end. So obviously with all eyes going to be on Wallenius, all eyes going to be on Boumediene. Should some eyes be on Victor Johansson as sort of like that one name that could fly under the radar on the back end?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for a team to beat Canada, you're going to need multiple players to step up that just are not there yet. And I feel like he is definitely one of them. And like you said, when you add that strength, you don't know how these guys are going to perform after that. You're drafting players 17, 18 years old. And I feel like it gets lost in translation of why, some of these players really there's so much pressure. And when you're a 4th round pick, I feel like it allows you to kind of settle in a little more, especially being overseas. You don't really have the media, pressure of a regular Maple Leafs pick, in my opinion. So I feel like it's going to really help him, and he needs to have a really good tournament. It's more of, these guys are fighting for their livelihood and they're playing the best players in the world at their age. So I feel like there's a chip on their shoulder for sure. So definitely one of the players that needs to be highlighted, as well as like a Ben Danford guy that I got to talk to earlier in the offseason. And, he came in with definitely a chip on his shoulder. And, he's been playing incredibly well, playing for Brantford Bulldogs, who is basically a like the Calgary. They have more 1st round picks than Calgary Flames right now. I mean, they're just in the OHL. So you have players like that are just like, they're playing for their career, honestly. And I feel like the type of play is more more playoff-esque than a regular season game in some of these other leagues. So you kind of get to see who is leveling up to that in playoff intensity. And that's why the bigger players that have more size, more muscle, more experience kind of do better in these tournaments. And I feel like, he is one of those guys that does have that experience playing against older players. So I think he is going to be able to translate his game better than some of these other guys.
I'm glad you guys are talking about players who are going to come across with a chip on their shoulder. Zane Prake, Michael Misa, 2 guys that obviously didn't even get the invite last time around. How's that going to play out for 2 players that have seen NHL action now coming back and getting the opportunity to potentially get Canada back in that gold conversation?
Yeah, for guys like that have seen NHL experience, you could bring in a guy like Braden Coots as well, who started out with Vancouver Canucks this year and played a couple games. And, I feel like that is always going to help when you have that experience playing against NHL players, because it's like the first step mentally. I think it's more mental than anything of I've been there. I have that chip on my shoulder. I should be up there. For a guy like Michael Misa, I am kind of surprised that he even is playing here, because I believe that he should just be lined up with Macklin Celebrini or Will Smith the entire year. Just kind of play him on one of the wings and let him cook a little bit. Don't play him 3rd line, time on ice, give him an opportunity, power play, and just let his skill do the talking like we're seeing with the Matthew Schaefer. So I am a little surprised about Michael Misa. I think that he is going to dominate. Him and McKenna, I think, are going to put up some absurd numbers. Even a guy like Porter Martone got a lot of experience playing internationally across Sidney Crosby and Celebrini. And, he even scored a goal, and everyone was talking about, Porter Martone might be the number 1 pick just because he scored a goal and looked good with Celebrini. But we're at a stage where I do believe that any sort of experience playing against older players like Ivar Stenberg playing in the SHL is going to help. If I had, a prediction of who's going to be the best player in the entire tournament, I would kind of go to an Ivar Stenberg because of what he's doing in the SHL. I tweeted out something like at 3 a.m. last night because I was, studying a bunch of his tape and I just could not go to sleep, doing like 15-pound weight lifts just while I was watching, like trying to, look better for the camera, because I did gain the 15 pounds that I believe Johansson should have, but I think that it was more of this guy is dominating against 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds in a league where he probably like a couple of years back shouldn't have even been here. Daniel or what the Sedin twins, when they were drafted in 1999, Daniel Sedin had the most points in the SHL for somebody 18 or younger and 42. And I believe Ivar Stenberg is on pace for 49 this year in 52 games. So he could beat a 26-year record just based on his production level. So I feel like the experience of any NHL time or any SHL time is going to be the biggest thing that you can absolutely get. And I think a guy like Michael Misa is also going to be able to dominate. So it's really good to have that experience.
How good, you talk about the experience. That's the most important thing too. Kind of a two-parter question here. Or I'll start off with one question first, and then you can shift your way over to the next one too. Based on this roster right now, the composition of it basically definitely felt like Team Canada learned from their mistakes last year, where they missed out on Misa, Parak, brought in guys for specific roles, which you really can't do that because a lot of those skill guys could easily adapt to those, specific roles. Just by roster comparison, could this team, this could be a short answer too, could this team really outmatch last year's team head to head if they were going facing each other one-on-one? Of course, some returning players as well. But overall, how is this important for some of the guys like McKenna, Martone, even TJ Genla, Caleb Desnoyers, Cole Baudouin, Keishon Aitchison, that have experience playing together at that U18 level where they all won gold?
Well, I would have to match up per player because you have Schaefer not there, Dickinson, two guys like that. But other than that, the forward group, I believe Misa should have been there regardless last year. That was not based on play. That did not make any sense. I could go on this, but I do not understand how you don't bring a guy when you need scoring that, put up John Tavares, Patrick Kane level numbers in the OHL last year. And then, Gavin McKenna is a year older. Michael Misa, has that chip on his shoulder. They didn't take the Saginaw guys, and they should have definitely last year. And, Keaton Verhoff is one of those players that I think could be a cornerstone of Team Canada in the future, just because 6'4", right-handed defenseman, 215 pounds, playing against 22, even 24, 25-year-olds in the NCAA. So he has that experience too. A guy like Cameron Reed, who is in the USHL and just had such a hard time, Chase Reed for the USA team. That is a player that I think is the best player on the back end for the USA. But then you have Canada, he'd probably be third or fourth on Team Canada, and it's not based on him. They're just so stacked. So I feel like when you have Keishon Aitchison, who's a very heavy but incredible goal scorer who put up 26 goals in the OHL the year prior in his draft year, and now you have him coming on with Jackson Smith. Harrison Brunick has some NHL experience. I feel like they just are so heavy on the back end too that they might not even play a guy like Zane Parekh for some reason if they don't need to, or if he's having a rough time. I do believe that he is a really good player, and Scott Wheeler said that he could be a Calder winner earlier in the season or in the off season. And I feel like that was something that could have happened, but the Flames were just so bad. So now you're putting him around talent, which he needs, and he could be one of the winners or losers of this tournament based on his kind of time on ice. And now you're getting a guy like Carter Baerback, who had the lacerated Achilles, but he only missed, a few months and then was skating in July. So, he didn't fully tear his lacerated Achilles. That's a guy that I see as a guy that could really impact a team from the bottom six, because you have to look at a lot of these guys' roles of what they're playing. It's like an all-star team, but who is going to allow you to, put them on the third or fourth line? Like a Brady Martin was a top 5 pick, and he might be on the bottom 6 role because that's just where he's better at. Same with like a Liam Greentree, who is big, but he's not the fastest skater, but he's so elite offensively. So it's just kind of like is there a scenario for all these players to really skyrocket their value? There's just not enough spots. So somebody is going to be disappointed. But at the same time, it just goes to show the depth of Canada. Whereas a lot of these guys that probably are playing fourth or third time on ice minutes would be playing a lot of minutes on Team USA. So it's just so hard to really count Canada out as the favorite. They just have so many guys. And I do believe that this roster is probably better than that team, but like only because of the amount of depth that they have right now. And this is just the training camp, but depth.
It's crazy because we're not even talking about the potential players that could be on this team that are obviously on NHL rosters. But I want to jump over. We talked a lot about Leafs goaltending in the early part of this episode. You brought up the 3 goaltenders that Canada has invited to camp, and 3 relatively big names. And I know for me, I'm a big Ravensburgen fan. I talked to him at the draft combine, and he touched on the jump to NCAA and why goalies might benefit from it, and getting the opportunity to kind of develop a little bit more. We all know goaltenders come into their own a little bit later on than, say, your everyday player. Your thoughts on Canadian goaltending, because it's been a big question mark for an extended period of time here. Now they're starting to see guys like Ravensburgen, like Ivankovic, like Carter George coming up and really bringing back the name of Canadian goaltending.
Well, it's funny that you brought up talking to him at the scouting combine, because I was to his right and I asked him, what his biggest strength he thought was, and he actually said the skating, and I actually was surprised because I had not really heard a goalie say his skating was his biggest strength, but it allows him to retrieve pucks behind the net, or he trusts himself more on his skates, and I totally understand now. But being a 6'4", 6'5" goaltender, it's really going to help that team if they are in need, because they basically took the opposite of a Ravensburgen and Jack Ivankovic, who said that his player comp for himself was a UC Saros, because 5'11" goaltender, really, really athletic, cool, calm, and collective in net. You're going to get a guy that has that playoff experience whenever you need. He's won gold before. He's a guy that Nashville took in the second round for a reason, even though he was under 6 feet. It's because he's just that good. So you kind of get everybody in the middle. Carter George is that 6'1", right in the middle kind of goalie who is also stable. But I would just want the upside in a Ravensburgen, because you have that size, and he went in the first round for a reason. He was the second goalie off the board. Columbus took Andrea, something like that. And then, you get Carter George there. So I would be surprised if Carter George was starting if it were me, but I really love Canada. Like, Ravensburgen is just one of my favorite goalies, because he was just an absolute monster in the WHL, and he is now going to be fighting with Askarov to be the 1A, 1B for the Sharks organization. And I just feel like that was such a steal. He should not have fallen to 30. And I'm just a really big fan of him.
We also mentioned, or we mentioned Victor Johansson, one of the Leaf prospects, off the top of the show. The other one that we mentioned, and we've talked about him as well, Ben Danford. Just seems to be in a really good spot right now, where the Brantford Bulldogs want to go on a championship run. Almost an assist per game, 11 and 14 for them. Obviously, with his defensive mindset, the ability to block shots, get into the lanes, be a very strong defensive presence. Obviously, Team Canada likes those kind of defenders, but he's got good mobility on the back end to break out. I just want to get your take on his role and his progression overall this season, because from what I've seen, even talking to him at the draft in Vegas, how he prided himself on his defensive game, it seems to be that is the next step going forward. And it even was the main talking point for Craig Berube and the coaching staff during the preseason, when they gave him some looks into the top 6 for their defense.
Yeah, I was talking to him at the NHLPA Rookie Showcase when they were doing like the cards and and he was just a funny guy. He's captain of Oshawa Generals, and he was a -10 for his plus minus in his first 8 games, which was just like not going well. And I feel like he needed a move because that was not going in the right direction. He was a great captain, and he had a really good season last year in 2024-2025 where he had 25 points, 61 games. But this year he's just been another animal. When you have more skilled players and you're playing on the back end, it just allows you to be more offensive. Throw that puck up to your forwards, breakout. He's a really good breakout passer, and I feel like it's not talked about a lot, where he's always on the defensive side, but he's always looking to push the puck up. It's like Kevin Love kind of reminds me of, like, when he got the rebound, he was always looking at LeBron to just throw that ball. So I feel like the Brantford Bulldogs are an absolute wagon, and you got a guy like Jet Luchenko that is coming there now. Caleb Malhotra I got to talk to last week, and he's a really funny guy. Definitely going to be a first-round pick this year. You get a guy like Merrick Van Acker, Jake O'Brien, who's a fantastic player, and now you get a guy like Ben Danford, who's just going to be picking up a lot of assists because they're playing with such incredible players. His numbers are going to look fantastic, but he's also working on his defensive game too. I do believe that this is going to be really good for him, and I would love if he made the team because I feel like that he deserves it this year. His first 8 games in the OHL this year were not that great, and then his last 14 after the trade have been fantastic. So you get a guy that's a really good skater. I do forget who he said his player comparison was, but it was really interesting. It might have been Brock Faber, but I'm not sure. It was a very young player, and I remember Greg Wyszynski was like, just dig the grave for me already, because it was like really young player, and you could just tell like these kids are watching very young defensemen already that are already in the league for like 2 or 3 years, and they're modeling their game after them. Ben Danford is one of those guys that I do believe the Leafs hit. First round pick 2024. I really do like his game, and I think he's elevated it so much since then. So this is a guy that internationally he hasn't really performed well points wise, but he's been a really good stout defender. If you want him to be that Nicholas Hjalmarsson, where it's just defense, all defense, and really just stay back there and let the offensive players cook, he can do that too. So I think that he's one of those guys that you need to bring because he's that defensive defenseman that you need that can also break out really quickly and has a really good accurate pass for his forwards to just break out.
Crazy too, because we're talking about Leafs needing defensemen too. So knowing that they have that in the pipeline is always a good thing. Last one from me. This is 2026 is going to be a 3-horse race right now. A lot of attention on McKenna for the last few seasons. But there's been a lot of elevation from 2 of his cohorts in the top 3 there. How much will this tournament dictate the 1, 2, 3 when it comes to the 2026 draft?
Well, now it's 1, 2, 3, 4 with Tynan Lawrence being the number 1 player with Corey Pronman's rankings, and I feel like we've been hearing a lot scouts wise of Tynan being that top guy. I got to talk to him like last week, and he was just really awesome. 13 points in 7 games, 8 goals, 5 assists, I believe. And he's just one of those guys that, he wants to do more. He feels like he could be much better than he already is. And in the USHL, those numbers might not seem that big of a deal, but that's incredible production in the USHL, which is a lot harder, like defensively, I guess, than a squad like the OHL or a league like the WHL. Because you like a guy like Shilov and Chase Reed. Let's talk about those two. They played in the USHL. Chase Reed had 0 points in 10 games playing for Waterloo. And then he went to the CHL in the OHL and he dominated. Same thing with Yegor Shilov. He played, I think he was not like 0.65 points per game last year. And now he's above a point per game player in the queue. I just feel like this league, the USHL, is made for development, in my opinion, and a lot of the stats are lower than we kind of want to see. Like it's a Logan Hensler thing. Logan Hensler went to Wisconsin. It wasn't probably the right fit because they play like an older style. I was talking to Nathan Grav and he told me that they play an older style at University of Wisconsin. And I was just like asking like why Logan Hensler went there, because he was an offensive defenseman that, had so much raw to his game offensively, and playing in the NTDP, you could see that. But then you go to the NCAA and you're playing like basically a defensive defenseman game, and his numbers just were not there. So he fell really, really far in the draft. And I feel like that's what kind of happens when you go into the USHL, because Tynan Lawrence, he can actually be the number one pick in this draft. Only true center at the top. I know they say Ryan Robrick is a center, but he's not. He's a wing. And Tynan is a guy that you take as your number one center or your top six center, and he's going to lock down the number one center on another team. So let's say the Blackhawks needed their number one center, and then they push Bedard to the wing or whatever it is. He can be able to defend Macklin Celebrini during the Western Conference Finals. I think these teams now are looking at every player's B game, because like Shane Malloy, who's he wrote the book on scouting, and he kind of talked about players' A games are the puck on their stick. How long is a player going to have their puck on their stick for? And he asked multiple prospect sets, and they were like 5 minutes a game. And it actually was under 2 minutes. Even the star players were under 2 minutes a game. So what are they going to do away from the puck? How is that B game? How is that going to allow you to have a winning roster and play winning hockey? And that's what you do away from the puck. And that's a guy like Brady Martin. That's why he went so high in the draft, because Brady Martin wasn't the most offensively skilled or produced the most points, but his B game was just fantastic. It was reminiscent of a Tom Wilson, of a Zach Hyman. Even if they're not scoring, they're winning in other ways. And a guy like Tynan Lawrence, he does that. Like a guy like Ivar Stenberg, he does that. What we're not seeing with Gavin McKenna right now is that. And I talked to Jackson Smith about this today, and I was just like, Gavin McKenna has so much star power, and he has to deal with all of the stuff, the interviews and everything. In the NCAA, it's so much of a higher degree of difficulty playing in this league for a kid that is undersized with his muscle. I think he's 165 pounds, listed 5'11", and I feel like it's harder for him, like a James Haggins, where you're going into that league playing against 22 to 25-year-olds, so it's going to affect you. But the thing is, his 5-on-5 play has not been number one overall pick generational talent. He's doing a lot when he has space. He's a very intelligent and he's a great playmaker, but we already knew that. We needed to see what is he going to do away from the puck, and we just have not seen a number one overall generational talent when you have three other not generational players, but franchise players in different categories. Like Ivar Stenberg has been historic in the SHL. Keaton Verhoff, who I haven't even talked about, has been unbelievable in the NCAA as a 6'4" right-handed defenseman, which 215 pounds just looks like a fourth forward out there for North Dakota. Absolutely incredible player. Like, how are you supposed to differentiate on these four players? And then Ethan Belchetz is 6'5", 225 pounds, 230 pounds, basically a skilled version of Shane Van Sage with a ton of playmaking ability. And we're not even talking about him as the number one pick. So it's not on Gavin McKenna. It's just the top four, top five players are just absurd this year. And it's just goes to show you the development that's going on in hockey and other sports. Like even in the NBA with Victor Wembanyama, we're seeing the incredible talent levels of these players just increase every year with the added focus on development and the money that's being put in on development. So now you're having 4 or 5 number one overall picks potentially in this class, with Tynan Lawrence kind of getting that elevated push with the Corey Pronman ranking. And I feel like it's just the start of his rise, because you're seeing him back, because I went to the USHL Fall Classic. The headline was Tynan Lawrence. About 30 minutes before the game, we heard that he was going to be out till mid-October with a couple foot injuries. So then he lost all of that for the hype. And then he came back in, and now 13 points in 7 games on a loaded Muskegon Lumberjacks team that was already the best team in the USHL. They're trying to go back-to-back Clark Cup champions. And now you're seeing why he was ranked so high. So there's so many incredible, talented players in this class. Ryan Lynn is the most talked about player that I've heard from any prospects. I've interviewed so many of the 2026 draft class, and every single one is talked about how incredible Ryan Lynn is. Same with Chase Reed as well. So you're seeing so many of these guys fighting for that top spot. It is not locked in right now with McKenna. I can tell you that. I know that you had to give him the benefit of the doubt in the beginning of the season. You had to give him that leeway. Whatever happened. But now we're at a point where he needs to have a big World Junior Championship to solidify himself as that number one pick. And let's say Tynan Lawrence or Keaton Verhoff or even a Chase Reed is that guy for Team Canada or Team USA, then they might actually start rising a lot more. So it's so dependent on who plays well, but it's also dependent on who the line mates are for these guys. Like McKenna's probably going to be paired up with a guy like Michael Misa. Well, is Tynan Lawrence going to have that third line role because he can produce at that level, and that's really good for him? Because a lot of these guys, it's where can you fit in? A lot of prospects, we talk about, oh, he's a top 6 player, but does that mean he's top 6? But if he's a top, if he's a bottom 6 player, does that mean he's going to bust because he can't play at that level? So a Tynan Lawrence can play on that third line. So is he going to be put there, and scouts and people online are going to overreact that he's a third line player, but it's only because of his fit on that. It helps the team. So there's a lot of narratives that get built during this tournament, but I think that we need to, like, details matter. So I think that we need to just look at the details of what player is playing with who, where they are with their role, the time on ice, the power play minutes, everything. And it's not just based on stats. So for me, this tournament is enormous for this specific draft class.
Yeah, no, you touched up on everything with Gavin McKenna and how his B game really isn't there. And I'm curious to see if that will actually translate. And if he can get back to dominating his age group, I think that'll be a huge factor for him. But I agree with you in terms of like him not being the consensus number 1 right now based on how everyone else is playing. And, you just listed a bunch of other, projected fits or guys battling to dethrone McKenna, Verhoff, Stenberg. I feel like Stenberg and Verhoff have that cut above, and they could be 1-2 right now, and Gavin could be going down the 3. Chase Reed, I'm big fan of his. I really thought he stood out during that Canada or CHL, USHL, or NTDP showcase. There's Carson Carrolls. You just mentioned Ryan Lynn. Obviously, there are a lot of other a few more 2026 draft prospects playing in this tournament or have the chance to increase their stock. I'm curious to see who are 2 names that you really want to highlight that you're interested in watching. And one more rapid fire question after this is basically who are going to be your first, second, and third, or your gold, silver, and bronze medalists for this World Junior Championship.
So I do believe that Canada deserves the top spot just in the projections right now, but I think it's going to be Canada, Sweden, USA. And I could totally see a scenario where Sweden wins. Like I could see a scenario where they just want it more in terms of they've lacked that winning gold success for so long. It's the only thing that they're thinking about. For me, I really do believe that like a Jake O'Brien is going to perform very well in a tournament like this because he's so skilled. You get him with any part of just any space, he's going to be absolutely able to cook with his playmaking ability. I do think like a guy like Carson Carrolls is very underrated, and he is being talked about a little more now, but I think that he could be really good defensively. I'm not sure if he's going to put up incredible stats, but it's all about defense too. Like Caleb Desnoyers, he's finally healthy. Is he like, I feel like he could be a guy. But my top 3 for Team Canada was probably going to be Misa, McKenna, and a guy like Porter Martone. I just really love those guys offensively. And then the top 2 are Keaton Verhoff, and I'd probably go with Kayshawn Aitchison because he could really be a good weapon for your team. Just on the back end. And then for Team USA, I feel like a guy like Cameron I feel like a guy like Chase Reed is just so much better than everyone really on his team. James Haggins is very, very talented. Cole Hudson is somebody that I think is going to be really good in a tournament like this. Cole Iserman always is performing well internationally, so I feel like he's going to be someone fun to watch as well. And then for Sweden, I would probably say Ivar Stenberg. I'm a really big Milton Gastrin fan who fell 37 to the Capitals last year, and they continue to draft phenomenally. I just feel like those 2 guys are probably, and Vigo. Vigo is one of my favorite players. His brother Williams also. Somebody that I've really liked, but Vigo Bjork has always played really, really well. It's kind of like the Cole Caulfield of the USA, or for Cole Caulfield for the Swedish team. So really do like Vigo's skill, and I feel like it's a big tournament for him because, he was a top 10 pick consensus in summer scouting this year and then just fell off of a cliff. So those three guys on all those teams, I feel like are going to be very dominant.
Well, Anthony, we appreciate you coming on and talking some prospects, talking World Juniors. We know it's the time of year. Everyone's, especially north of the border here, everyone's getting loaded up for some World Junior hockey, and hopefully Canada can find a way to step back into the limelight of this tournament. But we appreciate you coming on, all the insight. Let the listeners know where they can find you on X and obviously your show as well.
Yeah, I am the Prospect Don on X, YouTube, TikTok. I have a company called Draft Prospects Hockey. We are one of the leaders in digital content for scouting with a bunch of these, prospect interviews. And I acquired the company about like 3 months ago, and we've been just doing phenomenal work with like USHL, like OHL, like Brantford Bulldogs. So we get a lot of these interviews really, really quickly, and we just try to push them out. We have a lot of articles, mock draft simulator over there that I personally, coded and created. So I feel like really proud of that project, as well as creator rankings, where we partnered with guys like Stephen Ellis, Nathan Grav, NHL Draft Pros, Blue Chip Prospect, who's big in the game, Gabe Foley, NHL Foley on X. So like Link, there's just a bunch of these like custom rankings that you can look through of scouts and your favorite content creators. So I felt like that was like a really interesting thing that no one else had. So we brought that over to Draft Prospects Hockey, and I feel like it's just a really cool place to go to if you're a nerd like me with scouts and stuff. So thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. You guys are doing fantastic work.
Appreciate it. And if you haven't already, like I said, check him out on X. Sick logo. Like maybe one of the best logos on X when it comes to NHL draft prospects. So appreciate it again, Anthony, coming on and taking the time, and we hope to get you back on soon.
Thank you, boys. I really appreciate that. The logo is sick. I love it.
Yeah, it is.
Appreciate you coming on, soon, man.
Enjoy the tournament, my man.
Thanks, you too.
Take care.
Buddy. Yeah, I mean, always great content when you get somebody like that on. He knows his shit. Like you've had him on Prospect Corners before. To get him on here, what a fortunate doer we are to hear what he has to say. Before we get to anything else, just a quick word from our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook and the Hockey Podcast Network. The jaw-dropping moments that make hockey hockey. Experience them all with DraftKings Sportsbook DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. Missouri listeners, listen up. DraftKings Sportsbook is now live in the Show Me State. New customers, this one's for you. Just bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN to turn $5 into $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, pass-through of per-wager tax may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer. Copyright NHL 2025. All rights reserved. I know we're going long here. I want to tie up a couple loose ends before we throw it. End this episode. But some quick notes that are floating around the Twitterverse or whatever you call it these days. Calle Jarnkrok, rumor is that he has signed with a team back in Sweden. There's a lot of speculation around it as to what's going on. Is there a mutual termination of contract? From what I'm understanding prior to this episode, what I understand is that he's signing for next season. So he's putting something in place for next season, which would alleviate, the idea of going to free agency, what have you. He's going to go back home, play back home. Obviously not seeing the ice time he wants to see here north of the border anyways. So my understanding is that's the rumor. Obviously we saw it on EP. We'll wait and see if there's more confirmation on that as the season progresses. But it certainly ties the Leafs' hands in terms of trading a guy like Cal Yarncroke, who's owed $2.1 million for the remainder of his contract. In saying that, one of the things we wanted to get to this episode, but we'll touch on next week based on how the week goes, William Nylander, there's potential he could be dropped in the lineup, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It creates the more depth throughout your lineup. You get some balanced scoring, a guy who hasn't had a point in 4 games.
It also lights the fire in him.
It lights the fire. You have to hold accountability. This guy likes to be challenged. We've seen it throughout his career. We've said it before. I was one of the biggest critics in William Nylander history before he got going here. So I think this is exactly what he needs, and he just needs a reminder of the player that he is. He's a 45 goal scorer. So it's time to get back to that, start shooting the puck, start putting the pucks in that, and that's going to start flowing, and that'll certainly help the Leafs long term. Outside of that, I do have one more ad read before we close it out, because it is the holiday season, and the Hockey Podcast Network is linked with Rakuten. The holidays are here, and that means it's the most wonderful time of the year to save with Rakuten. Use Rakuten to stack cash back at your favorite stores on top of holiday sales. That's savings on savings. With Rakuten, you can get cash back on gifts for everyone on your list, from toys for the kids to kitchen gear for the person who loves to cook, to electronics for everyone. You can even save on something for yourself. Just shop the stores you love, and cash back is automatically added to your account, and you can choose to get paid via Interact e-Transfer, PayPal, or check. Join for free today and get a new member bonus after minimum qualifying purchases. Just go to Rakuten.ca, download the app, and install the browser extension. That's Rakuten, Rakuten. Terms and conditions do apply. Some of the stores involved include Adidas, Expedia, Lenovo, Sephora, you name it. There is cashback opportunities this holiday season. Last but not least, Peter, Auston Matthews is up to a quiet 12 goals this season. People are still saying he doesn't look like the old Auston Matthews. He's still got 12 goals this season. That includes the 2 in preseason. We are up to, I believe I said $21 when it comes to the Princess Margaret Hospital for Cancer Research. So anybody who wants to meet that, feel free. We are trying to do $150 every goal, whether it's preseason, regular season, playoffs, to give back the same way we did last year. We want to do it again this year. So if you'd like to join the cause, by all means, DM one of us, and we will get you involved as well. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, my friend, anything you need our listeners to know for the upcoming week?
Just keep an eye out for a couple of the Leaf prospect pieces for Danford and Johansson. I'm going to be working on that. And because they're going to be at the World Juniors, as well as, a player or draft eligible players to watch. I know we listed a bunch of them, talking to Anthony about a lot of these names. So chances are they're going to be on that list as well. So be sure to check those 2 out coming up soon.
Well, like we said, it's tournament time. It's December. We're closing in on Christmas and the holiday season for all those and for whatever you celebrate. So we're excited for that. We're excited for some more Leaf hockey. We're excited to see if the streak continues for the blue and white, and if Dennis Hildeby will be the guy as it progresses into a second week. Outside of that, make sure you tune in at the Hockey Podcast Network for all of your hockey needs. We're brought to you by DraftKings, Rakuten, as well as BioSteel, where you can get 20% off your order now. Make sure you check out the description, the show description on YouTube. Hit subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're looking for tickets this holiday season, you get $20 off on your first purchase with the promo code in the episode description with SeatGeek. So make sure you check out SeatGeek as well. Until then, until next week, we've got our friend Alex Hobson to close us out here on episode 217 of the Sticks and the Six podcast. Until next time, go Leafs go.